Meanwhile, across the country in Seattle, Washington, an historic vote raising the city's minimum wage to $15 an hour. It'll be phased in over 3 to 7 years and will be the highest minimum wage in the country and double the current federal rate of $7.25 an hour. So, will this be a test case for other American cities and states? And does $15 an hour make economic sense? Gary Burtless, an economist at the Brookings Institute, supports a minimum wage hike, and James Shirk, a senior policy analyst at the Heritage Foundation, is opposed. James, let me, first of all, welcome, gentlemen, and James, let me begin with you. Why are you opposed to it? You think $15 doesn't make economic sense, huh?
You need more than good intentions. You need good results. And we're talking about an already weak economy when businesses are struggling with the costs of the Affordable Care Act and Obamacare. And now you're proposing doubling the cost of hiring entry-level workers? The only way they're going to be able to respond is by cutting jobs and by raising prices.
Mr. Burtless, I assume you like or embrace the concept of a minimum wage to begin with. But why should the government, and especially a city, be engaged in the business of setting labor prices?
Well, it's a little easier to justify for the federal government. The federal government is raising the minimum wage on a nationwide basis. It means that fundamentally employers get to take wages out of the negotiating with their workers. The minimum wage workers are receiving this minimum wage, and it has a much less severe adverse employment effect. If you just do it in one city, the danger is that in that one city, businesses in that city are going to lose out to businesses that are in the suburbs where the minimum wage remains lower. That's the danger here.
Let me ask you, James, go back to you. First of all, what do you think of what Gary just said? And also, would you be in favor of a higher minimum wage than what it's currently, the proposed Obama administration of $10 and change? Or you just want to keep things status quo?
Well, I think it actually makes more sense if you're going to have a minimum wage to do it at the state or the local level rather than the federal level. I mean, $15 an hour, I think, is going to hurt a lot of people in Seattle. But it would be like dropping a nuclear bomb if you on the economies of, say, West Virginia or Arkansas. You've got huge differences in cost of living across the country, and something that an urban area would be quite painful in would be absolutely devastating in rural and areas with a lower cost of living. So I don't think you'd want one federal rate. I think you'd want to allow flexibility for local areas. But more broadly speaking, this is a weak economy. The Affordable Care Act is already making it more expensive to hire less skilled workers for full-time positions. I think raising the minimum wage right now to a historically unprecedented level, which is what $10 an hour would be a huge mistake that would hurt a lot of people.
So, Mr. Burtless, your point is that at $15 an hour, the businesses in Seattle may lose out because over in Bellevue, the minimum wage may be $10 an hour and they can charge less. But I want to come back to the question I asked initially. Why do we need a minimum wage in the first place? You seem to answer by saying that we need it because it takes a salary negotiation off the table when you're dealing with low-wage workers. But why philosophically is a minimum wage a good idea?
It's something that the great majority of American citizens support. They think that the federal government should put its thumb on the scale, helping low-wage workers earn a standard of living through their own efforts that brings them closer to the middle income level. And B, it is a very easy kind of labor regulation to enforce. It is much cheaper than raising taxes and then redistributing the money to people. So those are the two main advantages. It agrees with American views about how low-paid labor should be paid, and second, it is much cheaper to do than most other ways of making poor families better off.
Gary, I'd like to get you to respond to what James was saying, that this is not a good thing for the economy because it's not fully recovered right now. Do you agree with that? Because some do argue that if you raise wages for the lowest workers, they're going to have more money to spend. And that would be a good thing for the economy, sort of like a catch-22 here.
I think that we want to keep it straight. Are we talking about raising the federal minimum or just one city's minimum? From what I understand, the Seattle area is actually doing quite well. It's in spite of having the highest minimum wage in the country on a state basis in Washington, the Washington economy is doing pretty well, but in particular the Seattle economy is doing pretty well, which I think is the reason that Seattle is the first city to enact such a high minimum wage. They feel prosperous. They feel like they can give the low-paid people in the city a wage hike. And that's what the citizens elected their mayor to do, and that's what the mayor is trying to do.
All right, gentlemen, thank you both very much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Gary Burtless with the Brookings Institute and James Shirk at the Heritage Foundation.